And thank you all for coming today to this session. It's a hot topic, Agentic AI. We were here last year in this room, and it was similar. There's a lot of people on the standing on the side. Who was here last year at this session? Can I just ask? Excellent. So all the people we inspired last year, they're off working away. They're not coming here to learn about this topic. They're actually doing it now, which is wonderful. So this will be the next cohort of enthusiasts that we bring to life. So my name is Simon Torrance. I run a company called AI Risk, and what we do is essentially captured in that picture. We help companies leap ahead of their competitors by effectively adopting agentic AI. And today, I'm not going to talk about what is agentic AI and how does it work in detail. I'm going to talk about what the strategic objective of agentic AI is, in my view, and how we move towards that. I'm going to talk for about 12 minutes, and then we have a wonderful panel of people who are right at the cutting edge, pioneers, who are driving agentic AI in their company. And we're going to take the benefit of their expertise and knowledge. So, without further ado, let me start by trying to bring to life how to think about agentic AI. And this quotation from the CEO of NVIDIA, the most valuable company in the world, is probably the best way to think about it. He talks about having, on the one hand, a company of human workers, like some of you here today, and on the other hand, having a vastly larger workforce of what he calls digital workers. In his case, he thinks there's going to be 2,000 times as many digital workers as there are human workers. And he thinks that's quite an exciting world to be in. In many ways, it's quite a worrying and scary world. But that essentially is the way of thinking about agentic AI. What could we do if we had not 200 people in our company, but 1,000 equivalent brains like we have here, working on serving customers better? Now, in terms of the types of agentic AI, there are different types, and we're going to talk about those in our discussion later on. And this maturity model, I find, is quite useful to help people understand the different types and how they compare to the type of AI that we might be using today, the generative AI. If you have Copilot or ChatGPT, that's essentially what I call level 1. It's a chatbot that you ask a question, it gives you an answer. All the stuff in purple is agentic AI, and the key difference, as you may know, is AI agents do things. They don't just give you answers, you ask them to undertake a task, and they do that. And they are capable, increasingly, of doing more and more of the tasks that only us humans could do in the past. So, where companies are today in terms of AI, most companies are around level 1, and your companies might be like that. You've put in place Copilot. Some companies, and it's not a huge number, are starting to experiment at level 2 and level 3, where they're using more sophisticated AI agents to undertake tasks, or they might start to be using agents to manage processes or workflows. Very, very small number of companies at level 3 today. Now, level 4 is where it gets even more interesting, let's put it that way. Level 4 is where the AI agents operate like we do, in unstructured environments. We've got a problem to solve. It's an unusual problem. It's an uncertain problem. We come together in a meeting room with different perspectives and expertise to solve that problem, and we do it very fast. That's what we call agentic teams. And we're going to hear from one of the panelists who's the world-leading expert at running these agentic teams. And today, nobody does that, apart from our clients, who we stimulated last year at this event to do that. Now, some people may be asking, what's level 5? That's the next generation where my agent, as a consumer, talks to your agent as a vendor and contracts between you and me without me having to speak to anybody from your company. Some people call that agentic commerce. I'm doing a workshop on that tomorrow if you're interested. That's the next level. It's not as mature as the others, but it's coming, and I recommend people start to understand that now. The key point I'm going to make today is that Even as we move into level 2 and 3, where we're using agents to maybe run processes, that's in some respects delivering efficiency gains, which are very important, but potentially can be copied by others. In economic terms, you can be competed to parity if you also have the tools to do that. My contention today is that level 4 and 5 is where the real differentiation comes. That's where you create compounding returns on your investment, because essentially you're creating a new asset class for the organization. And I'll try and describe that asset class here now. Companies invest in various things, typically called capital, different types of capital. Those are assets that create value later on in the future. The insurance industry has typically invested in these types of capital. Financial capital, network capital, your distribution networks, and, like everybody here, human capital, all the brains in this room, and intellectual capital, which describes how you work and captures that, perhaps in algorithms. But you can see the problem with those assets there. They can be competed away by competitors, and to grow a business in a knowledge-intensive sector like insurance, you often have to hire more and more people as you grow. And what Agentic AI does for the first time ever is it decouples growth from the need to hire more people. So for investors, this is very, very interesting, and for leaders of companies whose drive is to make the company more successful, this is also very interesting. And of course, human capital is not an appreciating asset, because every time you leave your company and get hired by another company, all that knowledge has gone with you. So these forms of capital typically are not appreciating assets. But I'm going to suggest there is a new form of capital, and this is what is at the heart of Agentic AI, which is called intelligence capital. It's the quality of the thinking in the organization, the accumulation of reasoning under conditions of uncertainty, why judgments are reached, why decisions are made, and now, for the first time, that reasoning is machine readable. It's possible to encode it and capture it and disperse it at scale, and that was never possible before. And as such, it becomes an asset that appreciates in value rather than depreciates, and is hard or difficult or impossible to copy by competitors. So there's a lot in what I've just described there, and I'm going to break it down in a bit more detail and show you an example. I'm going to give you an example of what this might look like in practice, then we'll discuss it on the panel with some real case studies. But let's just take a little step back about where we are today. So Anthropic published some research recently about how AI agents are using their models at the moment. And you can see here that the vast majority of the use of their models are for things that are not intelligence capital. They're for coding, which is a complex, important task, but it doesn't drive competitive advantage for insurance. Competitive advantage in insurance is about pricing the risk effectively, understanding how to deal with ambiguous claims, managing your allocation of capital across a portfolio. And the application of Agentic AI to complex business deliberation, which is what we all do day in, day out, is near zero today, apart from in a couple of case studies which we'll show you later. So where the industry is today, my view is that it's focused on automation and efficiency. And it's thinking about Agentic AI and other forms of AI and digital tools from that perspective. So Lemonade, the CEO of Lemonade, said recently that incumbents can never catch up with the very low cost ratios, loss adjustment ratios that they have. It's a structural benefit of being AI native, and that gives them advantage. Now, the incumbents have started to wake up to this, And the president of Chubb said very recently in his investor presentation that by 2030, he is targeting 85% automation in claims and underwriting. 85% from virtually zero or near zero today by 2030. And he's also publicly saying we don't need so many people. Now, there are some companies who are leaping ahead. And it's not just the insurtechs. And this is the worry for insurtechs. Because Allianz Partners has probably the best, or one of the best, agentic case studies I've seen in the market, where they are now have gone from 10% straight-through processing on claims to 90%. That is enormous benefits using an agentic AI platform that has enabled them to do something that was just not possible before. And initially, it took them about 18 months to do this. Now, every time they roll this out, it's taking 6 to 3 months. So the incumbents, enabled by some of the technology that you'll see at this event, are able to maybe outperform the insurtechs that in the past have claimed they were going to win in the world of AI. So let's take a quick example now. And last year, we showed an example of a claims process that was managed by an agentic team. And I'm going to take a step up now and go for complex, or a relatively complex, underwriting use case in the specialty market. Anybody from specialty market here? Okay, good. Should we quote this risk? This is today what happens when that question comes in at 8 o'clock in the morning. Unstructured formats, lots of people involved, multiple back and forth with the broker. The reasoning behind the quote and the decision never recorded. And in our analysis with specialty underwriters, we've seen that about only 30% of time of underwriters, very important knowledge workers, is spent on actually underwriting. The rest of the time is dealing with all these routine activities, this jumble of spaghetti that today is what we have to work with. Now, let's look at how this can be, firstly, radically automated, like Allianz Partners. And then I'm going to take the next step into where we get into deliberative AI and intelligence capital. So there are now tools available, what I call agentic process automation tools, that within a few months, you can streamline the process, just like Allianz Partners has done. But this is in underwriting as well, more complex claims as well, finance and other functions. And what we found is that something like, or up to, let's say, 70% of the activity that underwriters, very highly paid knowledge workers, were paid to do is now automatable. And once you can automate 70% of what they can do, you have a choice. You can ask them to do more value-added stuff, spend more time with the customers, understanding the market, or you may not need so many of them. I prefer the first option there. Now let's look at this, taking it to the next level. This is the deliberative AI, which is how we operate. A complex submission comes in. It can't be automated. It either goes to a human to deal with, a human underwriter, but then we have the problem we've had before, or maybe it goes to an agentic team. And the agentic team operates very much like the human team would operate. Here it is here. You can see these different agents. They are expert, or they have been trained to be expert in their specific area of specialty, you can see there, pricing, etc. They interact and collaborate on Microsoft Teams or Slack or some other tool. That's their meeting room, if you like. And facilitated by a facilitator agent, they're given the task, we've got to make this decision in this amount of time, I need you to think about it. They go off and think about it, come back with their ideas, they brainstorm, challenge, debate, make a decision, quote goes back to the broker. And all of that happens in very fast time, but it's a complex submission, not one that can be automated, and it's much faster. And when we include the humans, you can see down the bottom, the humans in this debate as well, the agents are learning. They're learning on the job the whole time, and every decision is auditable, and this is where the intelligence capital comes, it is permanently recorded. And every time they do this, they start off not very good, just like your trainees or when you hire someone, not very good. But after a few times, they get better, and they get better, and they get better, and the human underwriters get involved less. And then after a while, they're as good, or they're as good at certain types of scenarios. Suddenly you have encoded that expertise into an agentic system which can't leave the company because it's in your system. It's not trapped in the heads of your underwriters, and you have a scalable intelligence which creates this new asset. So finally, there is a demo. I did a demo last year showing how these agents work. It's not a demo, it's a recording of them brainstorming. And if you want to have a look at it, I don't have time to do it now, but if you want to have a look, you can go to the website. There's a nice, you can see from last year, but have a look at that if you wish. Finally, I'm going to ask the panelists up in a sec. This is how to think about it. You can go away from here and think about something else, go back to the business as usual. I would suggest, if you have a remit to deliver real value to your company, to deliver real value to the customers of the company and the shareholders of the company and your colleagues, I think this is the most important thing in insurance today in terms of it being able to deliver on its promise to the world. And the way to think about this is that you have a human workforce today, you add agents, and after a while, maybe, probably not, you might have 100 million like Jensen Huang from NVIDIA, but let's say you have at least, let's say more than the humans you have, working with the humans to solve problems for customers. So we have productivity, we do things faster, cheaper, like the Allianz Partners example I gave you. We now have new operational capacity. We have hundreds, thousands of AI agents that operate like we do, not exactly the same like we do, and we have this new asset being created, intelligence capital. So you need some new metrics for this. I'm not going to go into detail on this. Let's discuss it a bit with the panel. But I would suggest if you're in operations or strategy or finance, there are some new metrics you should put in place to drive the company towards creating this new asset, which will have a tremendous impact on the value of the company. So thank you very much for that. I hope that's useful. I'm now going to ask the panelists to come up, if I could, and we're going to discuss this. Now, I'll introduce the panelists, and they are, as I said, they're all working right on the pioneering edge of this topic from different perspectives. And Thomas Kuhnt is from HDI, board member, CIO and COO, has been driving top-down approach to how they can really exploit AI. Ed Ackerman is the COO of Qover, a leading digital MGA. And we heard from Contown, the CEO, last year, didn't we? They've been doing some really wonderful work right at the cutting edge. And Franck here is the expert on these agentic teams. He knows more about how you make these work, make them work like humans, even better than humans, and how they interact with humans than anybody on the planet today. So that's a sort of, hopefully, a useful welcome. If anybody has any questions, do put them into Slido. Last time we had 600 questions, and we couldn't get through them all. But if you do want, if there's a real burning question that you really want answered, connect with me on LinkedIn, and I promise to respond to you to any question you might have. So with that set up, I'd like to maybe start with you, Thomas, if I could, and tell us how are you, let's maybe take a little bit a step back, tell us a bit about HDI, remind people what HDI does, and tell us how are you thinking about this and what are you doing at the moment?
Yeah, I'm very happy to. So HDI is a global corporate and specialty insurer active in 22 markets, roughly 10 billion in premiums in euros that we write at the moment. And my reality is pretty close to the picture you showed for marine underwriting. I think that is a quite accurate reflection of how underwriting works in our company. We do quite a bit of specialty business. And of course, last year already we asked ourselves, what does AI mean for us in general? And I think back then I said, nobody really knows. And we decided, let's start with bottom-up experimentation. So let's just try out some things, get a feel for how well the tech works. And then I think last year when I was in London, I said, oh, it's still more like in the Matrix movie, red pill, blue pill. Do you really now invest hugely in the tech, or is it too early to do that? And I think back then I said, well, we are going to start doing a top-down strategy exercise. We've now done that, and I think the mood today in our company is very different. I think it's pretty clear that this is real. We don't really know yet how to scale that in a larger corporate enterprise environment. But now we have 7 initiatives where we really try to push, honestly, more level 1 and 2 type of AI, whereas we find it very hard to directly jump to level 4. But we are on the journey, and the early results are so promising that I would just encourage everybody to give it a try. I think we will, I mean, it's still evolving the tech, so we will need to learn how to do governance risk control well, especially in a larger regulated environment. But I think it's a very promising, and we will continue to embark on that journey.
You mentioned something, you said red pill and blue pill. Will you maybe just explain that to everybody and which one have you swallowed?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I'm a bit older, so I still like The Matrix as a movie. So it was a little bit, with all the hype out there, with all the noise, it's always very hard. When do you really leave the Matrix, which is kind of the environment of the illusion, and when do you face reality on how real is the AI? And for us, the red pill is more like, let's face reality. Let's really have a serious look at that, whether this will change our business, or whether you just stay in the Matrix and let us pass by. I mean, for the ones that are older, I mean, we've seen so many technology hypes, so it's always very hard in my role to argue, well, do I now really allocate resources to the topic, or do I rather wait? And I think that was more the tough decision last year to say, hey, maybe now is the time to really take it more seriously and start investing.
Because it's very interesting. In the keynote at the beginning of the day, we heard some leaders of big insurance companies saying, well, we've been doing a lot of experimentation and pilots and testing. It's now time to get a bit more serious. And I think that's what you're now doing, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, and that's why we have roughly 50 people experimenting across 7 initiatives to really see how far can we push the limit. Very similar to the marine cargo case you showed. I think given our reality, which is not great, right? I mean, 70% I think is pretty accurate in terms of data entry and how underwriters and senior claims adjusters work today. So I do think there are a lot of low-hanging fruits. But also with investor pressure, of course, you first focus on efficiency. So I think it's quite natural in our roles that you start there. Then, of course, we have to, I mean, you always keep us honest and push us, hey, what's the next level to go to? But arguably, we are still looking at efficiency, getting faster, and taking all the monkey work basically away from our people.
Yeah. Because what I've noticed, you're quite right, the focus on efficiency, but I haven't seen the words intelligence capital on the radar yet. I mean, that's why we're here. You know, I'm spreading the news here, but hopefully it's going to be something that helps to make a stronger case to investors and the board. Yeah. So Ed, could you tell us a bit about, again, just remind people what you do, but tell us a bit about what you've been doing over the last few years now in this space.
Yeah, so cover insurance embedded and orchestrating. So that means effectively we help our clients work with any risk carriers for any products that they would like across Europe and bring that to bear for any of their use cases. Now, for us, that means fundamentally we specialize in financial services and automotive. And we, like you, I think, we thought, let's go efficiency first. That has to be the first thing that we crack. We started our journey in 2024, so 2 years ago. Year 1 was very much around experimentation. Year 2, we really started to implement, and the implementation there is around our customer service and claims handling capabilities. Quentin gave an update last year. I think what we've done since is really accelerated and charged forward with our work in those areas. Now, we work across many, many programs, and so we've been executing program by program. Some of those are run with different delegation of authority with different partners and different use cases. So we've gone largest to smallest to maximize those gains. And I think just to give you some concrete examples, in customer care, we've moved from responding or co-pilot of an email response to full chat with one of our agents, and now voice AI, which we've just executed for one of our largest customers, where their first port of call is to speak directly to the AI agent. Roughly a quarter of our contact now in that area is automated, of which 80% is no human in the loop. In claims, we have around about 20 agents who are deciding, much like your diagram above, deciding what to do. Is this negligence? Is this potentially fraud? Are there any discrepancies between what they've told me and what I see in the images that I'm being given? And then we have a deliberation agent who brings all of that together, as you say, corrals people to get to a result and answers. And I think for those use cases where we are most confident, we are actually able to see a full straight-through process effect for those. And then lastly, I think, importantly, we spoke a little bit before this, it doesn't just stop at that efficiency agenda in the front end. I think increasingly what we're seeing is the importance of actually exposing the wider company to AI. And so, yes, Claude Code for our coders, Open Code, Dust agents for a number of our team. All of these are given over to the company to try and get the AI literacy up. We see that as really the precursor to be very, very impactful in this space, to have broad AI literacy, not just confined to a small group.
So you're seeing real bottom line benefits yet, or? Yep.
We are, yeah. Could we go faster? I'm sure our CEO would say yes. But no, we are seeing meaningful benefits. I think genuinely we're on the way. Our targets this year are to get to 60% automation for claims, of which half of that new human in the loop, and we are well on our way to do that across many different programs with many different carriers and complexities.
Yeah, okay, great. Now, Franck, I've built you up quite a bit earlier on, but Franck has been running these teams of agents that collaborate like humans do to solve problems on Slack, interacting with humans as well. Can you just tell us a little bit about that? What actually happens and what you've learnt from it? And maybe in any way you like.
Okay, just maybe to give you some perspective. So 1 year ago, with our company, we wanted to test something different. So we presented in this specific room agents debating with humans about a claim. I remember many people looking at me like, you're totally crazy, but that was a reality. I think since then, just to make it clear, it wasn't a chatbot. It wasn't a very well-structured process. It was just humans and AI discussing on a Slack channel totally freely to come up with the best decision. Yeah, let's say, well, 1 year ago, it was already very strange to present that, but it was reality. 1 year after, it's absolutely crazy. So what happened in 1 year? First of all, technologically speaking, let's say now we have agents equipped with MCPs. I will not go into detail there, but it helps to get any data you want on service, internally and externally. Secondly, I think obviously LLMs progressed a lot every day. So I think we're agnostic from any LLMs. On our side, we also worked a lot on building memory of agents. Like any human being, as a claim handler, you have the view of the world. As a customer advocate, you have a view of your clients. Trying to build a memory. And we also added something that I remember 1 year ago, people told me, it's just gadget. We talked about blockchain. Blockchain for identity, security of each and every agent. I think now, hopefully, everybody understood that. But what was even more important for us, I think, beyond technology, there was a confirmation that, yes, AI is no more a tool, is going beyond the digital worker, it's AI as a teammate. And again, last year I mentioned this term, teammate, nobody believed that. Today it's a reality. And teammate is an agent you can work with, which obviously not just executing tasks, but challenge you, and can also be very creative. And I will close there, because I'm pretty sure that who knows what is OpenClaw? Raise your hand just for me, okay. So it did not exist 3 months ago. So we just tested, talking about creativity of agents. So we just created one agent and let it live by itself. It's called Monsieur K in French, so Mr. K. You can look on Post-it. He's living by itself. Really. He created even an insurance product called K-Life. He built his own website. This product, by the way, is only for agents. AI agents, not for human. It's absolutely insane. And honestly, I don't know what to think about it. Is it absolutely scary or incredible? But this is the trend. Something big is happening. And exactly what you mentioned. Agents are not tools. They can do incredible stuff. The thing for us will be how to master that. This is a big question.
Yeah, and it's interesting in that example, that test you did with OpenClaw, is that the agent was given no objective. It was just said, you need to earn a living to live, like we all do. You have to earn money to live. And he came up with a way of doing it. And he also asked some of the humans to help him do things. It had created, the agent was managing, in this case, humans to do things for the agent.
Yeah, just to give you a scary moment of my life, I received a call from him. Honestly, I still don't understand how he managed to get his own phone number, asking me to solve a CAPTCHA problem on a website because he could not get access to it. So I can imagine when you start to have these things happening, you say, am I dreaming or something happening? So, yeah.
Can I ask you, a lot of people think, well, You can't replicate the very high-level knowledge work that we all have. You know, we've been to school, university maybe, we've been doing extra training, we've been experienced on the job for 10 years. That's like 30 or 40 years. But Franck, in one of your examples, your deployments, you created an actuary agent in 1 week. Now, that's not like John, the actuary over there, who's got 40 years. But just tell us what you're doing there and what type of agent was that and why, and what does, when it connected with other agents, what happened, the magic of that?
I think it's coming back to what you mentioned about capital intelligence. The first thing that we started to build agents was, our assumptions was we need to build on hundreds of years of data. And I think for me, in fact, we changed our mind to say maybe data is good, but it already reflects the past. And more importantly, does not explain you why the decisions were made. So we decided more to have a kind of a junior actuary with the role to obviously optimize the loss ratio. And by just discussing, understanding, by the way, humans asking me to behave as an actuary, the other agents asking him to behave as an actuary, he started to think differently. And creativity again came here. So that's why when you talk about how to create that, yes, it's as if you were hiring a junior that can really, really, really grow very quickly if he got the right feedbacks from agents, but also from humans. And it's really something very important, and something specific that we built on is really to ensure that you have interaction with humans because they have the expertise. And humans need to behave like they were, again, coaching a junior. And this is, for me, more the biggest challenge. Because usually you still consider AI as a tool, as a machine. And as an expert, it's always very difficult, only even to share that with human, but with machine is another story.
Well, let me just, there's a really good question someone's asked, and I can take it to Thomas. Workers' councils, how are they responding to the AI future, and how do you manage that?
Well, I think workers' councils are just a reality we have to deal with. I think it's something you have to work with and not against, and I do think that at least we have a quite modern workers' council. They've understood that stopping this will harm the company more than trying to kind of together guide us how we experiment with that. So we're working alongside. They often get the AI solutions first. They can play around with it. So I think we are trying to keep them as literate as we are so that we can take them along the journey.
Yeah. And Ed, can I ask you, in terms of maybe upskilling or reskilling the organization, because you can have project teams that work on something, but how are you thinking about that to change the nature of the skills that you need to operate in this environment?
Yeah, and I think you mentioned it before. It would be much nicer if we retained and reskilled people rather than, reducing headcount, even as this capacity grows. I think the big thing for us is how do we make sure once we have the automation and the AI workflows in place that they are operating exactly how we want to? How do they evolve sensibly with the right inputs and the right stimulus and not fall off the rails? And we've spoken a bit here about the governance structure. I see the human aspect of repurposing our teams to do much more in the way of quality assurance, much more in the way of governance to make sure actually that we're super confident with what is going out to customers. If we think about moving from a sort of 9 to 5, in my example, care and claims world, to a 24/7 picture where we have to be really sure that the agents are doing exactly what we would like them to do with all this intelligence capital, we need to be able to monitor and maintain that. And I think that's where we see a repurposing of our teams from frontline operatives for the most part to initially AI champions in each of those teams. And ultimately, I think they will be, the data scientists of the future. They will be the people who really understand how this works. And they'll be doing some weird and wonderful and very creative things to unlock all the extra potential that we have.
Yeah, I was just thinking that if you're applying for a job, you can come as just yourself, or next time you apply for a job, you could say, and here's my 20 agents that work with me, so you get 20 for the price of one, maybe. Thomas, can I ask you a technical question? Because I think you're also the CIO, aren't you? For those who've got some bigger companies like you as well, what are the questions around legacy systems and data and things like that? Does that slow us? I mean, I'm sure it slows us down, but how do you think about managing that?
Well, I think AI exposes the weaknesses that you have, both in governance but also on legacy. But for me, that's more going to come a little bit later in the transformation. What I love about the technology, it's so fast to deploy. Yeah. Because normally what frustrates me as a CIO, even though you might have the right idea, on an enterprise level to really bring out new stuff takes so long. Yeah. And that's where I think some of the AI solutions are very different, because how does, at least our process in our company normally starts for corporate and specialty business with an email, right? And it's very easy to connect the solutions to Outlook. And then you can kind of do a lot of the magic, the agentic AI, completely outside of your legacy environment. Of course, once you're done, you've taken the decision, you need to reintegrate and pre-populate your legacy systems. And you do have some API calls in between for sanction checks and some of those things. But you can pretty much build it, for now, at least parallel to the legacy world. I think the deeper we go, the more we will be forced to modernize and really rethink our legacy. But at least for now, it has not slowed us down.
Yeah. I just want to ask Frank. So, Frank, last time we were here, since then we've been undertaking projects to implement those agentic teams, all over the place, and it's been a fascinating journey. What are the lessons that you've found, when a company says, that's interesting, I'd like to get started? What are the lessons that you've learned in practice about making it happen?
I think for me, probably the biggest learning is not technology. I think technological problems are solved or will be solved very shortly. Obviously, there are still security things like this, but it's, for me, all about change management. Again, I was mentioning the fact that if you want to go beyond efficiency, or let's say efficiency, we mentioned it's all about reduction of FTEs. If you're in the seat of the FTEs, are you really willing to play the game of AI? Because hey, you will accelerate my redundancy. Now if I push to the next level, which is about scaling capital intelligence, what's it trapped in the head of people? And I think we had a very interesting workshop this morning with yourself and Otera, mentioning that in fact all the documentation that we have, all the nice procedures stored there and there, you can put it in garbage. Because usually they are outdated, they don't reflect the reality, and we don't care. It's just for us to reassure us themselves. So if you want now to really work with the people, as an expert, like I was mentioning, I saw experts not willing to share already with the other experts, now willing to share with the machine. It's a massive, let's say, thing that prevent you to move on. So you need to build a story. What I've seen personally, the companies which are willing to grow, we have a growth story, meaning they will leverage the experts so that they can be at the heart of the transformation and expand, is a very nice position to be. If you're a big company that have many FTEs, and I've been working for Allianz for many, many years, I can imagine that it's a problem. Yeah. Because the problem is not in the next 10 years. If you start to implement that, it's tomorrow. Yeah. So this, for me, is the biggest challenge you will face.
There's a very big HR issue here as well, isn't there? Because you're saying you've now got a new workmate or set of workmates. They cost a tiny fraction of you. That is the reality there. Now, it's interesting, in one of the case studies you showed last time, is that the humans also can't keep up with the agents in that environment, because the agents don't go to bed, and they're racing away and they work really fast. And some of the humans who want to contribute their expertise to the debate, the deliberations, said, I can't keep up, could you clone me? So could you take not the whole of me, but the bit of me, my knowledge, that is going to be useful for that team, and turn me into an agent? And you did that, which was incredible. And interestingly, you paid the original human more money. Now, that's just a small example and one tiny, early experiment. But if you want the human workers to contribute their intelligence to the system, there needs to be some new incentives and to manage this. So I think that's going to be a big issue. So just in the interest of time, and thank you, luckily we don't have 600 questions today, but if you do have questions that we haven't answered today, connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'll either answer them or ask the colleagues to. Just in the last minute, a lot of senior and smart people here today, what would you recommend they do when they go back to the, depends on who they are, but in general, what should they do when they go back to the office after this event, and in terms of how they can move forward? Ed?
get tooling out into the hands of the wider company. I think it's fine to keep this as a proof of concept in some cases, but at a certain point it needs to break out, it needs to be company-wide. The creativity comes from the masses, not from a small project team.
Great. And Thomas?
Just try it out, and I think really think ahead of what's going to hit you in 6 to 9 months with scaling, because I think a lot of us will get stuck or are stuck in POC kind of traps. What are the foundational layers you need to put in place? I mean, because at the end, AI is a lot of software development, and I think we know how to address some of those things, but though there are quite significant lead times to put all of that in place. Think about governance, risk, and control. Right? We want to move at the speed of startups, but not break trust and reliability of what we do, and that sounds much easier than it's done.
Thank you. And
Yeah,
Frank?
and probably I think myself, I have also the opportunity to take over the CEO position of an actual company, consulting firm. And I think the best recommendation I can tell you is ask your CFO to play with the Claude, for instance, and to make some stuff about it. I did it. I asked him. He never touched any AI. In 2 weeks, he was building all these cash flow statements with Claude and showing that to the whole company. This is the best example.
Get the
If
CFO
your
on
CFO
board.
can do it, everybody can play with it.
Great. So speak to your CFO, get him or her doing things. Thank you very much. Should we say thanks to the panel, please? Thank you.